Before the story starts, drop a rating from 0 to 10 in the comments so we know if you're with us. Imagine walking into a banquet where power laughs at you for showing up. Would you walk out with your chin high or stay and make the room explain itself? Hit like, share with someone who's had to earn their seat twice, and let's begin. Name? The woman with the tablet didn't look up. Her eyelashes had more authority than most emails. Rafael Mendez, he said. Measured, clean suit. A businessman who knew every emergency exit by heart. +1. Miss Noemi Reyes, service corridor, is seize my guest, Rafael said. And the air adjusted by a degree, like a thermostat, discovering conscience. A printer sighed out a sticker. Guest in polite gray, the color saved for vendors. Cousins without RSVP, the kind of +1 a room tolerates. The woman slid it toward Noemi, without letting her eyes fall below Rafael's collarbone. Noemi accepted it, with the gentleness of a person who knows courtesy is protective gear. Her dress was navy and ironed. Her shoes were shined by hands that loved what lasts. The tiny crack in her thumbnail was bandaged with clear tape. She'd caught it on a brass hinge that morning and refused to bleed on a white duvet. Behind them, 2 donors rehearsed bravery at whisper volume, bold to bring the help. Laughter sprinkled the lobby like glitter that scratches. Rafa purred a voice, trained to save catastrophes with seating charts. Celia Montrose, event director for the Halcyon Foundation. You made it. She clocked the gray sticker, recalibrated, without smudging her smile. Welcome, Miss Reyes. Table 9. Anything you need, ask me. Don't ask the room. It wasn't an apology, it was a map. The ballroom was built to make adjectives feel at home. Chandeliers dripped like expensive excuses. A banner deployed children's faces as punctuation. Musicians faked intimacy over a mic'd quartet. Servers flowed with rented kindness. Along the wall, a silent auction posed as virtue in glass, art that wanted to be older. A crate of 1982 Chateau Belcom, displayed like a sacrament, an emerald bracelet under a dome that treated light like a PR firm. Don't touch, said the attendant, with the patient malice of someone trained to apologize before you ask. Noemi didn't touch. She looked the way people who clean for a living learn to look. At the bracelet's backplate, where foil hid behind filigree. At the crate's nails, machine perfect, too new for an old story. At the wine label's edges, a shade too crisp, glue that hadn't learned humility. Rafael angled toward table 9. Hungry. I ate, she said. Nerves don't leave room. At the table, handshakes materialized for Rafael, 2 remembered.
Yahweh.
One extended a hand to her, then withdrew when he noticed gray. Oh, you're with me, Rafael finished, tone polite, grammar final. If you've ever entered a room that decides your story before you speak, you know the choreography that follows. A maitre d' corrected Noemi's posture with a glance. A woman in sequins praised her bravery, the way you praise a child for using the big slide. A hedge fund whisper laughed into a napkin. Someone asked which agency placed her and whether they had anyone who knows marble. The laugh that mattered arrived with a microphone voice and a network pin. Tell me you're not doing a Pretty Woman, Rafa. Noemi's eyes met his without breaking anything. I scrubbed kitchens bigger than this ballroom, she said, soft as a clean sheet snapping. I've never thrown away food that expensive. He blinked at the mirror and wandered off to look for a joke that didn't bruise. Celia's quarterly smile clicked on as she drifted past. Rafa, you're at 9 with the Montrose Endowment. Miss Reyes, Hospitality Lounge is through those doors if you want. Quieter seating. Why would she want quieter seating? Rafael asked. So the evening isn't overwhelming, Celia said, tastefully. The program's intense. I clean houses with 4 staircases and 3 divorces. Noemi said, I'm hard to overwhelm. Celia's teeth approved without understanding. Lovely. Enjoy the evening. The auctioneer rose like a well-known lie and sang the room awake. Ladies and gentlemen, your generosity tonight funds transitional housing. Let's have a look at what angels bid on. Paddles vibrated. Phones readied. Staff braced. The first lot went clean. The second went cleaner. The third, the emerald bracelet, arrived in a halo of adjectives. A Montrose family heirloom on loan. Authenticated. A century of elegance. People leaned in the way you lean toward a rumor you want to be true. Noemi leaned too, and saw the wrong thing. A hairline seam, impatience in the solder, a whisper of green, on the edge of the lot card where someone's unsteady cloth had kissed too hard. She looked at Raphael. His jaw did a small private thing that meant "I see you seeing it," and handed her a linen napkin, as if they were simply being civilized. Her fingers didn't tremble, not for lights, not for music, not for opinions. Trembling is for hands that haven't scrubbed a bloodstain out of tile at 2 a.m. because a child's nose ran like a faucet. "Do you want me to?" he started. "Not yet," she said. Lots marched. Laughter kept a beat. Entrees arrived in warm silence. The first humiliation didn't come with volume. It came with a sticker. A volunteer, the age of a suggestion, approached the table with a tray of fresh badges. "We printed you a new one," she chirped to Noemi, and offered a deeper shade of gray labeled Hospitality. Noemi looked at the square like it had asked for a favor. "Does hospitality come with a door I can close from the inside?" she asked. The girl's practiced smile flickered. "It's cozy. I'm working on doors," Noemi said, and kept the wrong sticker on purpose. Later, when Raphael stepped away to greet an old partner who remembered him from the era before his hair admitted its first white, the table tried to become a room. "So Miss Reyes," said a man whose cufflinks had opinions, "what do you think of our little gathering?" "I think you rent kindness by the hour," she said, cheerful as a clean sink. "It's nice to see it get used." Another gentleman, gold tie, voice like a warranty, tilted his head. "How long have you worked for Mr. Mendez?" "I don't work for him," Noemi said. "I work at his building. He pays the agency. I clean things adults forget are alive." A woman with perfect posture and a knack for announcing she believed in girls' education asked what Noemi did for herself. "Pay rent," Noemi said. "Write lists. Fix small things until bigger things notice." "You're funny," the posture said, and meant you're inconvenient. At the silent auction, the crate of 1982, Belcombe claimed old wood with new ink. Noemi brushed the rough edge with her thumbnail, felt a burr that didn't match the story, smelled a ghost of fresh varnish hiding under the perfume of nostalgia. She listened, really listened, to the chandelier nearest the wine. It clicked out of rhythm. A metal fatigue only rooms confess to those who scrub their bones. Her eyes found the maintenance door half tucked behind a velvet drape, and the gap where a guard should have been. A floor manager's radio crackled in an earpiece nearby. "We good on the Belcombe crate. The donor wants it near the stage for optics." "Optics," Noemi muttered, a word she trusted less than bleach. Celia reappeared, flanked by a woman in emerald satin who wore the room like skin. "Noemi, this is Veronica Vale, co-chair and friend of the foundation." Friend was a verb here. Veronica smiled at Raphael, then at Noemi, like she'd discovered a new species and was deciding whether to pet it. "Raphael, darling, I didn't know you'd be bringing authenticity." "Veronica," Raphael said, kindness and gravity sharing the same syllable. "Miss Reyes," Veronica sang. "If you need anything, hospitality has the most divine lemon tartlets." "I work nights," Noemi replied. "Sugar is how a room says it forgives you for staying." Veronica blinked. "Charming. I do love a story. You'll get one," Noemi said, and meant it. The program rolled. Speakers told definitive truths about resilience in shoes that never see the bus. Videos practiced empathy until empathy grew tired. The audience cried on schedule. Veronica auctioned off the bracelet with a speech about legacy that used the word ours too many times. Bids jumped. The spotlight loved itself. The attendant in white gloves breathed like a stagehand. Noemi watched the corner of the lot card for that breath of wrong green and saw it try to be shy. She noticed the bracelet's clasp had been tightened by a hand that didn't respect age. She could hear, no, she could feel, the audible click the chandelier made every 37 seconds when expansion met ego. She counted. She wrote the number on her palm with a pen someone stuck in a flower arrangement. 37. She looked at the crate of wine and saw a nailhead that wasn't bloody with time. Raphael's phone buzzed once. "You okay?" She had texted herself the habit of asking. He looked at her. She nodded. He did too. He didn't know what was coming. He knew he would choose her side when it came. And because rooms know when they're about to be asked to confess, humiliation deepened its grip in small, pretty ways. A staffer approached Noemi and asked for her glass. "Refills are for guests with white badges," then pretended not to notice the sentence he'd said out loud. A photographer framed table 9 in a shot, then angled so Noemi's gray edge fell out of the picture. A program note misprinted her name as Naomi. Then someone corrected it with a pen and a flourish that said, "You're welcome." "You doing okay?" Raphael asked. Back at her side with 2 waters and the stubbornness men learn when they have slept badly for the right reason. "I'm ready for the part where the room learns to read," Noemi said. "Do you trust me?" Without adjectives, he said. One song, one speech, one ribbon of applause later, the moment stretched itself across the room like a tight drum. A server passed too close to the emerald dome. The music paused between movements. A camera's battery lapsed. The chandelier clicked on 37 and sounded like regret. Noemi stood. "Miss Reyes," Celia said, a whisper with a seatbelt. "Please stay seated while we what?" Noemi said. "Clap at the wrong time." Celia's eyes flicked to security. Veronica's smile lifted like a scalpel. The auctioneer inhaled for the next lot, the Belcom crate, and Noemi stepped into the lane between tables, the way you step into a street when you know the cars are looking. "Excuse me," she told the attendant at the Emerald Dome, and it wasn't a question. "Guests mustn't," the attendant began. "Then I won't be a guest," Noemi said. Voice suddenly the sound tile makes when you push dirt toward a drain. "I'll be a witness." The laugh rose, small and cruel and practiced. Everyone out because the businessman had brought the housekeeper to the banquet, and look, she was doing a thing in front of grown-ups. Noemi unfolded the napkin Raphael had given her and held up her left hand. The tiny crack in her thumbnail glinted under lights. "I clean for a living," she said. Not into the mic, into the room. "I know the difference between old and pretending. May I show you something that costs less than a lie?" "Security," Veronica murmured, and 2 black suits took a step to the music of policy. "Let her," Raphael said. And there was a silence inside the silence that told you who paid for the room and how. Celia nodded, minutely, but she nodded. The attendant lifted the dome like a confession. Noemi touched nothing. She tipped the corner of the lot card and the breath of wrong green smiled on the linen where the edge had flirted with the bracelet's impatient back. She held it next to the light. Anyone who had ever tried to hide a stain could see it blush. "Dye can be conservation," a voice said near the front. "Celia's professional, the kind that knows how to lay track in front of a moving train. It can be honest care." "It can," Noemi agreed. "If you say so on the card. If you don't, it's a costume." A murmuring began, the kind that makes donors reconsider how they pronounce generosity. The auctioneer tried to buoy the night. "We'll pause this item, and we'll audit it," Raphael added, mild as a clean invoice, "on camera, for the foundation's sake." Hospitality, Veronica said, almost kindly. Miss Reyes, you've made your point. Let us proceed. I haven't made it yet, Noemi said, and turned to the wine. The crate's corners had the glossy confidence of new finish disguised as dust. The nails were too uniform by a degree that lives in wrists, not in math. She tapped one with a fingernail. The sound lacked the familiar tiredness old wood learns. The labels were crisp, edges too eager. Do you have a thermometer? She asked. The nearest server. A what? He blinked. Kitchen, Noemi said. Now, a runner disappeared. The chandelier clicked on 37. Noemi looked up. One trim ring had shifted a whisper left. The kind of thing a person who changes bulbs might notice, and a person who buys bulbs would not. She counted to 37 again. Raphael leaned in. You're seeing 3 things at once. I've been outnumbered by messes my whole life, she said. It trains you. The runner returned with a kitchen thermometer that had saved more chickens than honor. Noemi slid it between 2 slats. The crate's heart was warm, imperceptibly, offensively warm, for wine that had supposedly napped in a cool cellar until tonight. She lifted the napkin, dabbed the back of a label edge. Glue winked on her cloth, fresh and vain. Madam, Veronica said, still smiling. Smiles cannot be sued. What exactly are you alleging? That a room this expensive should be honest before it is photogenic, Noemi said. And that your crate tells a story with bad acting. A camera found her face. A second found Veronica's. The laugh didn't know where to land now. The auctioneer, desperate to redirect, raised his hand toward the band. The band saw Celia's eyes and did not play. The server, who had been trained to ignore everything that wasn't a plate, looked at Noemi like a person being told their name properly for the first time in a day. Miss Reyes, Celia whispered, this isn't how we have done it. Noemi finished. I know. That's why I'm here. Security took another step, uncertain whether truth counts as a threat. Raphael moved so quietly you could hear it, placing himself on the line that divides men who are useful from men who want credit. If she's escorted, I'm escorted, he told the guard, and my pledge goes home with me. The guard looked at Celia. Celia looked at Veronica. Veronica's smile sank to its ankles and stayed there. Fine, she said. Let the show play. Then hospitality. It's not a show, Noemi said. It's housekeeping. The thermometer blinked its guilty number. The napkin held its fresh glue. The lot card carried its wrong green. The chandelier clicked its tired 37. And that right there is where a room like this usually swallows a truth with a word like discretion. That's where a woman with a gray sticker realizes she can't win against lighting design and alumni lists. That's where the laugh decides it was right all along. Except the chandelier clicked again, and this time what Noemi had noticed in passing picked its moment. The shifted ring above the wine crate, unloved, unlevel, gave a soft metallic sigh that had nothing to do with jewels or Bordeaux, and everything to do with physics. A single set screw, guilty and almost free, blinked tiny in the wash of light. Noemi didn't scream. She didn't point. She moved 2 steps, palm up, voice steady. Stop right there, she said to the server, pushing a cart under the kissing radius. He did, because some voices hold rooms like hands do. What now? Veronica asked, as if the universe had chosen a tasteless time to be real. Now we decide if optics or gravity gets to win, Noemi said. Someone get maintenance. Miss Reyes, Celia said, halfway between prayer and policy. How do you know? I clean a townhouse with a chandelier the size of your ego. Noemi told Veronica without looking at her. I know the sound a tired screw makes. The laugh tried to come back, small and social. It died quick when a maintenance tech, Johnny, badge slightly crooked, courage untelevised, arrived with a ladder and a tool belt that smelled like competence. Which? He asked. Left of center, second ring, Noemi said. You can hear it needing you. He climbed. The room held its breath like a child who doesn't trust water yet. Johnny tightened what the last event had loosened. Metal decided to behave again. Applause tried to be born. Noemi shook her head minutely and it died, because clapping for avoided physics is greedy. Johnny descended with a face that had been taught to apologize for existing. Noemi clapped once, decisive, for him only. Thank you. He nodded at her, then at the chandelier, then at the crate with a look that said, I don't drink wine that lies. Back to the program, Veronica announced, cracking the air like a teacher who owns a bell. Lot 13 resumed shortly. No, Raphael said gently. Lot 13 is withdrawn. Lot 14's crate goes to audit. The statement goes out tonight. What statement? Veronica asked. The honest one, Celia said, surprising herself and everybody else. And we credit Miss Reyes, in bold. You can't just, Veronica started. You can, Noemi said. Grown-ups can do anything if they're willing to pay the bill. The cameras found the napkin, green and glue, telling their small, inglorious truth. The laugh from earlier remembered its manners and sat down. Somewhere by the service door, a violinist put his bow down because silence was finally doing its job. Hospitality. Veronica tried one last time, sugar crystallizing into knife. Miss Reyes, hospitality is a closet with chairs. Noemi said, I prefer rooms with exits. Celia's headset crackled. Legal wants to know if we listened to the woman who kept our ceiling up and our name clean. Celia said, and took the mic from the auctioneer the way surgeons take instruments. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, we are withdrawing 2 lots pending verification. We're also updating our process. Every item will carry what it's hiding, or it stays home. If you came to be flattered, the bar is open. If you came to be useful, stay. The room made a new sound, not applause, not shock, a human exhale that rooms only earn when they stop pretending they are churches and admit they are kitchens. Veronica turned to Raphael, smile refitted. You know this will cost us donors. It will cost us liars, he said. We'll survive. She leaned, whisper low enough to stain. You always were sentimental. He looked at Noemi. About the right things, he said. And because conspiracies prefer whisper campaigns to sunlight, the soft knives came out immediately. An usher appeared with a complimentary cafe card for Noemi. A board aide asked for a quick signature on a photograph release that had the word perpetuity tucked into a corner like mildew. A security captain, embarrassed and obedient, inquired whether Noemi would mind stepping into hospitality while we calmed the floor. Noemi smiled like a person holding a baby and a hot pan at once. No cafe card, she said. No photos unless my name prints bigger than perpetuity. No closets. If you need to escort someone, escort the wrong green. Celia, hearing the edge, stepped between the knives and the woman who had just saved her job and her sleep. She stays, she said, headset blinking like approval. And we're going to need Miss Reyes at the audit table. Raphael watched the room decide who it wanted to be and chose it out loud. I'm rewriting my pledge, he told the chair. It pays for ledgers, UV lamps, extra technician shifts, and the courage tax that comes due when you stop lying. Is courage tax deductible? Murmured a donor with a soul. He only remembered on even-numbered years. We'll ask legal, Celia said, after they removed perpetuity from anything meant for humans. The band did not play. The chandelier behaved. The emerald waited, embarrassed. The Belcombe crate sat where lies sit when they're not invited to dinner. And now, because you know how nights like this work, the room tried one more trick that makes strangers into suspects and dignity into a prop. My mother's bracelet, gasped a woman near table 4, eyes whipped to gray. Old reflexes are fast. Veronica almost smiled.
Noemi didn't flinch. Stage, she said, and walked there like a person carrying a list and a past. She set her tote down. She opened it, palms up, wallet, compact, sewing kit, sanitizer, a folded family photo, a lint roller, a short screwdriver, tiny notebook looped with elastic, a roll of blue painter's tape, the napkin with its green and glue. No bracelet. Check the bar mat, she told the nearest server. Cloth is obedient. They lifted. The bracelet clung underneath like a lesson. The room laughed, cleanly, finally at itself. Security nodded at Noemi like a man who had just learned to enjoy his job for the first time that week. Celia handed the mic back to the auctioneer with new terms taped inside her head. Veronica tried to be the last word and failed. Rafa leaned in, quiet. You done? Halfway, Noemi said. We've only moved the trash can. We haven't taken it out. He smiled, tired and taller inside. Then we'll take it out. The audit team wheeled a cart into a side room that smelled like varnish and panic. Lights got cruel in a useful way. A jeweler with a loop and unshakable wrists arrived from the kitchen. Because every event has someone who can fix a clasp in a storm. A maintenance log appeared. A thermometer sat in a dish of ice to reset its conscience. Celia stood, headset off, as if microphones were for people who haven't earned quiet yet. Legal hovered with a form that was evolving in real time from theft to consent. Security held the door, as if this was what doors were made for. Noemi washed her hands, dried them on linen that wouldn't be reused, and stood with her thumbnail bandage catching light. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't angry, she was busy. Where do you want me? She asked the jeweler. Where you can see, the jeweler said. Noemi nodded, stepped into the sight line between what a room wants to believe and what it owes, and got ready to show a banquet how to read itself aloud. The audit room smelled like wood polish, camera batteries, and people deciding who they were going to be when this was over. The jeweler placed the emerald on a clean pad, as if laying down a small truth that had gotten tired of performing. Back first, she murmured. If the story is honest, it will hold from the side you think nobody will check. Noemi stood where light and angle worked like teammates, 3 feet left of the table, 2 feet behind the jeweler's shoulder, far enough to see movement without casting a shadow, close enough to hear metal breathe. Foil's impatient, she said, softly, to the room rather than to anyone. Someone didn't let it finish cooling. How can you tell? Asked a young staffer whose job title was probably experience, and whose eyes still believed in nouns. I was broke, Noemi replied. I learned to fix bracelets for girls who couldn't afford to throw them away, and needed to look expensive for a bad reason. They always brought me impatience. It sounds like this. She tapped the table gently. The backplate whispered back, a faint tick like a lie clearing its throat. The jeweler nodded, loop to eye. There, and there, saw their bleed. She looked up at Celia. If you want to call it conservation, you print it on the card. If you don't, it's misrepresentation. Change the card, Celia said. And the policy, after we pay people who can spell it. Noemi added, it's a long word. Legal stepped in, cufflinks, chewing light. We'll need a statement for the file. He unfolded a form that had survived 3 mergers. We appreciate your concern, Ms. Reyes, but given your lack of credentials, please refrain from finish that sentence. Raphael said, evenly, and make sure you like yourself afterward. Legal blinked. We're just protecting the foundation. Protect it with verbs, Noemi said. Not doors. The crate of Belcombe waited its turn like a defendant who knew the judge's calendar. The thermometer lay in ice, repenting. The maintenance tech, Johnny, had sat on a rolling stool, with his hands on his knees, like a man who has done a day's work, and is prepared to do too. You want me to stay? He asked, not meeting anyone's eyes, because sometimes eye contact feels like asking for a raise. You saved the ceiling, Celia said. You can write the byline. The side door murmured. Veronica Vale entered without hurry, without dust, without apologies. Power arrives like that. She took in the room, pad, loop, napkin, ice, Johnny, Noemi, like a general studying weather. What is this? She asked, sweetness hardening into structure. A short course in honesty, Celia said. A liability, legal countered. A story, Veronica decided, eyes swinging to the camera operator who had found a wall socket and a conscience. Turn that off. It was already on when Miss Reyes kept the chandelier from auditioning for a lawsuit. The operator said, not moving. I'm keeping it on so the next manager doesn't forget the next Johnny. Veronica smiled the way chess pieces smile when they believe they can move in any direction. Miss Reyes, she began, saccharine edged with razors, we are grateful for your attention to detail. You've earned a rest, hospitality, no closets tonight, Noemi said. We're doing the sink, not hiding the plate. Then a token of appreciation. Veronica slid a cafe card across the pad, the kind that pretends to be currency when the job is to keep people quiet. For your service. There's a card I want more, Noemi said. The one that says Staff Reyes, Noemi said. I don't have to ask permission to do the work you want to put your names on. Veronica turned to Raphael, switching dialects. This is you, isn't it? You always had a taste for theater. I aged out of theater, he said. I'm in receipts now. The jeweler cleared her throat in the language professionals use. When rooms forget what time it is. Emerald, enhanced beyond conservation without disclosure. Withdraw or relabel. Wine we haven't opened a crate, but the labels and glue are how to put this. Overly enthusiastic about existing tonight. Open one, Noemi said. Legal lifted a hand. Absolutely not. Chain of custody. It's chain of custody until a donor takes a photo of a cork that reads 2019. Raphael said. Oh. Then it's chain of comedy. The maintenance log arrived. A clipboard with grease on the corners and truth in the margins. Johnny flipped to the relevant date. Service last month, he said. Ring B, screw E, noted monitor. No follow-up. Oh. That's on me. Oh. He swallowed something hard. I didn't have the hours. Noemi looked at Celia. Put hours in the budget before adjectives. Done, Celia said, pencil already on a pad. And Johnny, thank you. In the hallway, the current of the banquet tried to pull people back towards spectacle. A band member peered in, fingers idling on a string that wanted to sing. A caterer hovered with a tray that smelled like a truce. A donor poked his head around the door. Curiosity, wrestling with image management. Celia shut the door gently and taped a handwritten sign. Audit in progress. We're saving you a headline. The jeweler took a new cotton tip. Oh. Dabbed the label edge of the bell comb. Oh. Lifted a translucent smear that had clearly met the world 5 minutes ago. Hello, she said to the glue. We see you. Maybe the vendor replaced labels damaged in shipping. Legal offered, words flailing for innocence to borrow. Maybe my landlord replaced my lease with a blessing. Oh, Noemi replied. But the rent still shows up. Open the crate, Raphael said.
Legal planted his heels. We cannot do that without donor consent. Call them, Celia said, headset returning to her ear. Like a crown of thorns she chose to wear anyway. Tell them we're choosing beds over stories tonight, and that they can donate replacement case stock if they value their last name more than optics. And if they refuse, Legal asked. Then we refuse, Noemi said. Pride isn't perishable, but decency is. The crate opened with a sigh that sounded like fresh paint, pretending to be dust. Bottles gleamed, like they had been waiting under a light, not underground. The cork of the first bottle read 2012 under a cap that wore 1982 like Halloween. Done, the jeweler said. Withdraw, apologize, refund, publish. Veronica's face didn't fall so much as recompute. This will ruin us, she said, and it was almost honest. It will rinse us, Celia corrected. There's a difference. A knock. The door cracked. A board member slid a document through like a roommate who owed rent. Sign this. Press will need language, he whispered. The language said minor variance. Regret any confusion. We remain committed. Phrases polished by centuries of people who never met the mess they made. Celia uncapped a pen and crossed out confusion. She wrote mistake. She crossed out minor. She wrote significant. She crossed out remain committed. She wrote are changing. She handed the pen to Noemi. Redline something. Noemi circled enhancement and wrote say exactly what was done. She circled volunteer and wrote pay them. She circled hospitality and wrote stop using this word for closets. Then she underlined her own name. Spell it right. Legal took a breath. The shape of surrender. We need a clean narrative, he said, but softer, like a man talking to himself. Not a perfect one. Make it boring, Noemi said. Boring survives daylight. They went back out as a group, because rooms must be addressed in their native habitat. The band didn't play. The chandelier behaved. The audience shifted, uneasy at first, then focused, as if a sermon were about to get useful. Celia held the mic. We've withdrawn 2 lots, she said, eyes level with the people who like to imagine themselves above consequences. We used the word mistake in a room that prefers confusion. We're publishing what we did and what we missed. We're crediting the people who kept us honest. Our jeweler, our maintenance tech, and Miss Noemi Reyes. She stepped back. The applause was the loud kind, earned enough to be uncomfortable. Veronica did not clap. The network man did, to his credit, like a person who just realized breathing is content. Raphael didn't speak, because he had already said the thing that mattered backstage. We pay the truth in advance. A donor raised a hand, an older woman whose face had known both kinds of tired. How do we help, without making this about us? Buy the boring things, Noemi said. UV bulbs, felt pads, extra hours for the person who notices the hum, money for whoever writes the ledger and tapes it at hand height, not head height. Pay the jeweler, who says no. Hire Johnny, before the screw gets ideas. A laugh rippled, the clean kind that learns. A server whispered amen into a tray. The rest of the night moved like honest work does when people stop performing. Food arrived hot, hands were steady. The auction half emptied, and half became pledges for needs that don't photograph well. The emerald card changed to enhanced, disclosed still beautiful. Bids dipped, then steadied, because beauty that tells the truth has a different kind of gravity. The bel cum lot vanished into a polite apology and a refund cue. The violinist closed the evening with 2 notes and a silence the room respected. At midnight, when chairs become puzzles and centerpieces become logistics, Veronica cornered Noemi by a rolling rack of tablecloths breathing starch. You humiliated me, she said, voice stripped of candy. I interrupted you, Noemi said. Humiliation is what happens when a lie runs out of hallway. You think you won, Veronica said. Noemi shook her head. I think the ceiling didn't fall on a server who needs to be able to work tomorrow, she said. And I think a family will sleep in a bed we can pay for, because we didn't have to pay for your cleanup. Veronica's eyes flicked to the gray sticker still on Noemi's dress. You're still gray, she said, like gravity. Remember that. I kept it on, Noemi said, to remember who still needs the door opened from the inside. The next morning, the emails arrived. Donors who had been waiting for a reason to trust again wrote, "Thank you for saying mistake." A few wrote, "Never again," and removed themselves from a list that had been costing more than it brought in. Vendors forwarded uncomfortable invoices. A glass company sent a note with a photo. A chandelier inspection line highlighted 6 times, ignored 5, funded none. A junior at the auction house sent a PDF. Verdi project. A refresh schedule that linked enhancements to giving moments. It had Veronica's initials on it, and the smell of a bad idea that had worn a tuxedo. Raphael forwarded the PDF to Celia, with 3 words, "We published this." Celia replied with 1. "Tonight, legal called a meeting. We need to tell the truth, and hire a bodyguard for it," Noemi said. "Same as last night." Raphael tapped the table with a finger that modeled patience. "We are not going to martyr ourselves theatrically. We are going to change the forms, refund the wrongs, name the helpers, and write a standard. Then we are going to be boring for a very long time." Celia slid a draft across. Room standard. Draft 0. It ran without adjectives. UV check before display. Ledger on door. W. Who touched this last and why? Consent forms and seasons. Not forever. Publish enhancements in the lot description. Maintenance budget line. Chandelier hours. Apology template. With verbs. Credit line for staff contributors in public communications. At the bottom, a signature block waited for names. Celia left her line blank. "Not mine," she said. "Hers." Noemi looked at the block, the way you look at a door you've always been made to knock on. "My name doesn't make it true," she said. "It makes it harder to erase," Celia replied. The first backlash came from where you'd predict, a letterhead heavy enough to bruise, accusing the foundation of eroding donor confidence and allowing uncredentialed individuals to interfere with valued relationships. It CG'd every paper with a society page, and the senator who loves committees, because committees are where courage naps. Raphael brought the letter to the maintenance shop, where Johnny was explaining to a new hire why screws go on vacation. "You want to read this?" Raphael asked him. Johnny glanced, shrugged. "You want the ceiling or the show?" he said. Raphael smiled, folded the letter, and used it to prop the door during a delivery. At home, Noemi boiled rice and listened to the radio tell a version of last night that left out the bit where a maintenance tech saved a lawsuit. She turned it off and wrote a list on the fridge with a dull pencil because sharp ones go missing in apartments with homework. Rent, soap, fluorescent bulbs, black ink. She added blue tape and underlined it. She added "call mama" and underlined it twice. Her mother answered on the second ring. Voice a song Noemi had learned long before English. Mahija. "Mama, did the room behave?" It remembered its manners for an hour. "Then you did your job." A pause. Softer. "And my grandchildren?" "I don't have children, Mama. I meant the people you keep clean," her mother said. And they both laughed in the tone women use when they've earned the right to be precise with their tenderness. After the call, the quiet rummaged for reasons to break. Someone slid a card under her door. A cafe card. Again. Wrapped in thank yous that didn't learn from the last lesson. She took it back downstairs, found the security guard, who had escorted a roomer out the night before, and put it in his hand. "For your kid," she said. "After homework. At 5 a.m. Because clean is a religion with its own sunrise." Noemi was in a penthouse sink, coaxing a stain to confess. The client, a woman with kind eyebrows and expensive fear, watched from a stool. "I saw you on my feed," she said, careful as a person whose money has done harm and help in equal measure. "You were brave." "I was specific," Noemi said. "Brave gets you applause. Specific gets you receipts." "Do you want to be on staff at the foundation?" the woman asked. "I could email someone. I want the people already there to be paid in black ink," Noemi said. "And I want to be where I'm useful. Today that's your sink." By noon the foundation statement went live. Job titles, not silhouettes. Verbs, not fog. Names spelled correctly. Mistake where most press departments reach for misunderstanding like it's a medic. The emails split like firewood. Some burned clean, some spit, a few smoked with indignation, that their money had not bought a permanent exception. The Verd Project PDF found a reporter with a spine he called Celia. On the record, he asked. On the wall, she said, and sent him the standard draft too, because a fence is better when it is also a manual. And then because a story can't resist testing itself. Veronica struck back where rooms believe they are untouchable. Narrative. She sent a note to select donors with a subject line that might as well have been typed in winks. Keeping our mission on track. It told a tale of well-meaning overreach, uncredentialed interference, and a misunderstood conservation practice. It painted Noemi as an outsider to our values, and Raphael as a friend too eager to make a point. It suggested a pledge freeze until governance improves. The note leaked in an hour, because optics love to gossip. The comments burned in two directions. Half wanted to crown Veronica the patron saint of keep the party going. The other half knew a closet when they saw one, and began moving chairs. Raphael met Veronica face to face in the small conference room with the too loud clock, because rooms with loud clocks remind you that truth has appointments. You should return the estate lots quietly, he said. You should publish the enhancements list. You should thank Noemi for saving you from a ceiling and from yourself. You think this is about a bracelet and a case of wine, Veronica said. This is about who tells the story. It was, Raphael agreed. Now it's about who signs the check for the beds. They'll side with me, she said, meaning the people who like the mirror more than the sink. Some will, he said. Enough won't. She folded her arms the way buildings fold. You're sentimental. He laughed once, kindly. I am. It's what kept me from becoming you. The board met. People who love speeches prepared some. People who love lists prepared 3. Noemi went because Celia said please, and because the standard had her name at the bottom, and she refused to let it be a decoration. We don't need another committee, one member said. We need caution. Caution is good. Noemi agreed, but make the caution about what matters. Your fear shouldn't be that donors will leave. Your fear should be that staff who tell you the truth will. Staff. Another sniffed. Miss Reyes is on contract until you quit calling her volunteer, Celia said. And after today she's on payroll. We'll move numbers, not adjectives. Legal tried a last ditch and brought out a form that had trapped more than one mouth. Non-disparagement and media conduct. He slid it across to Noemi with a face that begged her to be small. She read it, smiled, uncapped a pen, and wrote a sentence in the margin. My silence is not a service you can buy. She slid it back. You can't afford what it would cost me. Raphael signed the standard. Celia signed. The jeweler signed. Johnny signed. The board chair lifted the pen like it might bite and signed too. A few abstained. Their names went in a ledger, the kind the public will read later when they want to see who learned and who practiced forgetting. And still, because pride is a river with many tributaries, the next gala on the calendar arrived with a surprise heritage lot on the program, smuggled by a donor who suspected that standards are easier to kill on stage than in draft. Celia saw the program change an hour before doors. Her hands went cold. Her voice did not. We don't have provenance, she told her team. We have a flashlight, said the jeweler. We have a cart, said Gloria, who had started showing up to events with a tool belt and the dignity of someone who knows where the valves are. We have a ladder, said Johnny. We have a person who can hold a room steady for the length of a screw, said Raphael, looking at Noemi like an apology he wasn't going to have to make this time. Noemi palmed the screwdriver in her tote, as if it were a prayer bead. We have 37 seconds until the chandelier clicks, she said, out of habit, then smiled. It doesn't anymore. Johnny fixed it. Doors opened. The room blinked, then posed. The surprise heritage lot rolled out in a light that had learned manners. A hush snaked around it.
Veronica, still on the committee roster like a stain that takes more than one cycle, hovered at a microphone. "Not tonight," Celia said, walking on stage before the drama could clear its throat. "We don't accept surprises in a room where people sleep under roofs we paid for. If it's real, it'll still be real tomorrow. Bring your paperwork, not your adjectives." A few donors stood to leave in performative huffs. The rest sat heavier, as if gravity were reminding them of the weight of their names. The band did not play. The chandelier did not click. The room learned to like the taste of being bored on purpose. Later, after the plates, after the pledges, after the 5-minute apology class that was somehow the hit of the night, Noemi stood in the back with Danny. Yes, Danny. He'd insisted on attending with his science board rolled under his arm, because data belongs in rooms with money. He looked up at her with the kind of preteen skepticism that respects no job title. "Was that the this?" he asked. "Like in the title?" When everyone laughed, she thought about the napkin with green and glue, about the thermometer wincing, about Johnny on a ladder and a screw deciding to behave, about Celia crossing out confusion and writing mistake, about Veronica learning that smiles can't sue gravity. She thought about a room that learned to put its ledger on the door. "No," she said. "That was the part where we made the room explain itself. The this is the part where we keep it from forgetting." He nodded like he wasn't supposed to be proud, but was anyway. "Can I tape the ledger lower?" he asked. "Please," she said. "Write your name big." He did. Blue tape neat. Letters careful. Danny rise. "I touched this last to make it fair. And because antagonists don't retire, they regroup." The whisper drifted, and the email blossomed, and the Joint Commission on Provenance Modernity invited itself back onto the calendar with white paper and gray intentions. Veronica pivoted to collaboration. A senator reheated balance. A columnist ran his honesty anti-art, and got the clicks he needed to make rent. The association predicted doom, then fatigue, then the end of generosity as we know it. Celia taped the standard to the inside of the committee's invitation, right over discretion. Noemi brought a cotton tip and a dictionary. Raphael brought a checkbook that paid for hours, not illusions. Johnny brought a torque wrench. The jeweler brought a lamp. The commission arrived on schedule with confidence measured in bullet points. "We all want the same thing," the chair began. Noemi raised a hand. "Say it out loud," she said. "Legacy," he replied. "Bed," she countered. "Try again." "Trust," he tried. "Now we can work," she said, and sat. They argued structure. They polished glossary. They fought politely about the difference between enhanced and altered, and less politely about whether reasonable can live in a sentence without a number. They drafted a clause that said publish enhancements on cards and online, do not bury them behind QR codes and hope. They put ledger on the door into a city permit, and made it boring enough to outlive elections. They made a checklist that doormen could love, and donors couldn't lawyer out of without blushing. They agreed to add chandelier hours to budgets like oil changes to cars. They made apologies with verbs a line item and not a performance. When they were done, this finally got to be specific. Not a cotton tip in a spotlight, but a door where a hand could land and find a pen waiting, and a line that read WHO touched this last and why. And because you asked for 3 full blocks and a half, the half arrives like all true halves do, in the split inside the person who started it. Noemi lay awake the night after the commission adjourned with a draft that finally felt like a sink you'd eat off of. The gray sticker still lived on her fridge next to a grocery list that believed in beans and rent. Raphael snored one room over on a couch that used to be a couch and was now the place friends sleep when they're not performing romance. The city breathed in her window. The chandelier in her memory did not click. She should have been content. Instead, a fear with good posture sat up next to her in the dark. What if you turned into a story the room tells itself so it can stop changing? She rose, padded to the kitchen, and opened the dictionary to integrity the way people open prayer books, underlined twice. Below it, in her own hand, a newer word, maintenance. She took a pen and added one more memory. The next morning she put on the same navy dress that had survived 1,000 opinions and one chandelier, and she walked to the building with the tablet desk and the lashes that used to have their own policy. The person at the desk looked up immediately and smiled like sunlight that had learned a boundary. Name, Noemi Reyes, she said. Welcome, the woman replied, printing a badge the color of receipts and sliding it across. What room do you need opened? All of them eventually, Noemi said. Today the one where we write the part you can't clap for and have to pay for. She taped the ledger lower. She wrote her name big. She waited for the laugh that didn't come. And she began the half you asked for, teaching a room how not to need her anymore. Noemi learned that teaching a room not to need you starts with teaching people they were allowed to notice. She printed the standard on cardstock that took tape well and walked it from door to door until her feet memorized the route. She showed the receptionist how to say who touched this last and why, without apologizing for the question. She gave Johnny a Sharpie and a confidence he kept in his back pocket. She stood with the jeweler under a lamp and practiced saying enhanced as if the word were a fact, not a confession. She turned the dictionary to integrity and left it open on the volunteer table like a mirror. The pushback changed costume but not motive. Veronica hired a crisis firm that specialized in killing nouns with adjectives. They issued a clarification that called mislabeling an interpretive variance. They accused Celia of over-indexing on staff narrative. They accused Raphael of personalizing governance. They didn't say Noemi's name, they said an uncredentialed individual, which is how power says go away without getting sued. Then came the clip. Someone cut together a video of Noemi emptying her tote on stage the night of the bracelet, spliced with the socialite's gasp and muted the part where the bracelet turned up under the bar mat. It hit feeds at 7:42 a.m. and had a caption with just enough poison to be shareable. Chaos at charity. Housekeeper turns gala into circus. The comments split fast. Half knives, half shields. Danny's homeroom group chat blew up. He texted his aunt the screenshot in 3 words. Do I answer? She sent back 2, with receipts. Celia had anticipated this flavor of cowardice. She posted the full 3-minute clip from the house feed, raw with timestamps. She labeled the pieces like a recipe. Emptying the tote. Bar mat lift. Bracelet under cloth. Apology. She didn't add music. She let the room indict itself. She pinned a comment. We don't perform honesty. We document it. It didn't trend like outrage, but it traveled like instructions, which was the point. The next tremor came with letterhead. A donor's lawyer suggested that paying Noemi as a standard steward while Raphael sat on the board was self-dealing. It was a suggestion designed to sound like a verdict. Raphael sent back the procurement file, 3 bids, a scope document, a rate table that made it clear they weren't buying a celebrity, a conflict statement, a signature from a board member who had opposed Raphael last spring and still signed because the math insisted. He sued the Attorney General's office not to flex because sunlight saves time. Will they stop? Celia asked, forehead against the cool of her office window. No, Noemi said, but they'll tire. Do you? Celia asked. Only at night, Noemi said, but soup fixes that. The city code, having become law, had to survive its First Amendment attempt. An association-friendly council member proposed replacing ledger on the door with digital compliance dashboard available upon request, which is how policy says please don't look too closely. The hearing felt like a test of whether boredom could beat theater. Noemi brought the cart. The jeweler brought the lamp. Johnny brought a dead battery. Mid-testimony, someone accidentally tripped a breaker in the chamber. The screens went blank. Noemi didn't miss her cue. She tapped the paper ledger with her pen in the sudden quiet. This one still works, she said, And the room laughed because sometimes the universe likes an argument so much it rigs the coincidence. The amendment died in committee, under the weight of its own euphemism. Veronica pivoted tactical. She filed a complaint against the jeweler with the professional board alleging unethical public commentary on client property. The board sent a form letter. The jeweler sent back 20 years of contracts and a sentence. My duty is to the truth. Your code agrees. She sued 3 peers who had quit quietly after being told their expertise was bad for fundraising. They all wrote affidavits. The complaint went to archive. The jeweler bought Noemi a coffee and called it a long overdue tax refund from a universe that had charged her interest. The museum called with a crisis that smelled like a learning opportunity. A junior curator, pressured to relabel a family loan after discovering a modern clasp on a chain advertised as medieval, asked for help. If I tell the truth, I'll be fired, she said. If I don't, I'll be complicit. Noemi didn't give a speech. She asked, who writes your paycheck? The curator hesitated. The museum, not the family, Noemi clarified. So your duty is to the wall. The curator took a breath and did the right thing. She wasn't fired. The family sulked. The museum survived. Children came with UV lights and left with a story about how old things can be honest and precious at the same time. At a shelter funded by the Banquet's new pledge, the ripple got personal. The facility called Celia at 2 a.m. Carbon monoxide alarm. Fainting smell, nobody trained, panic on both sides of the desk. Celia called Noemi, who called Johnny, who called a friend at the utility, who called a supervisor who had a brother in night ops. They rolled a portable detector, a wrench, a list. They cracked windows against the building's stubborn casements. They propped doors with chairs that finally felt heroic. They traced the hiss to a faulty appliance stuffed by a well-meaning donation into a room that wasn't permitted for cooking. They shut it off. They wrote the ledger. They didn't make it a press release. The next morning, the shelter posted a photo of a row of cots with a caption that didn't beg slept. That one got more likes than any chandelier had earned in a year. The hurt got creative. A private investigator turned up in Johnny's orbit with a job offer from a luxury property firm that had recently decided to care about safety in a way that paid too well to be real. We need a head of facilities with your instincts, the man said, voice soaked in deli meat sincerity. You'd start by writing an affidavit that this chandelier nonsense was exaggerated. Johnny, who had never been courted and hated the sensation, chewed his lip and looked at the torque wrench on his bench. He called Noemi. She didn't tell him what to do. She asked a question she trusts. Would you still like yourself afterward? He didn't take the job. He kept the card. He gave it to the AG's office during a deposition like a person who knows receipts when he sees them. Raphael's board flirted with a mutiny that didn't have the courage to say its name. A faction wrote a memo called Refocusing on Mission, which proposed cutting the standard team as a distraction from core deliverables. It was the kind of proposal that gets traction because it looks like sanity from far away. Raphael put numbers on it. Refunds avoided, legal spend down, donor churn stabilizing, staff turnover improved, cost of lamps versus cost of reputational triage. He attached 3 letters from beneficiaries whose core deliverables looked like beds and medicine and a night without fear. He didn't win by a landslide, but he didn't lose. And sometimes governance is about keeping the right door unlocked long enough for it to become the normal door. At school, Danny took a hit he hadn't trained for. A kid with a phone waved the edited clip and made a noise that wasn't a word but did a lot of damage. Your aunt is drama, he sneered. Danny went red, then cold. He brought his science board back to school and asked the teacher for 5 minutes. He showed the sugar chart from the iced tea. He showed the full clip from the gala. He taped the ledger to the whiteboard and wrote WHO touched us last and Y in block letters that didn't shake. He asked the class to sign after they wiped their desks. Enough did that. The phone kid couldn't pretend nobody cared. It didn't solve middle school. It solved an hour. Sometimes that's the fight. Veronica found a new battlefield: philanthropy journalism. She bought a column that pretended to be opinion and ran it under a friend's byline. It asked if insistence on procedural purity was antithetical to the spirit of giving. It asked whether the cotton test was class warfare. It used the word resentment 4 times. Rafael asked Renata to respond. She refused to dignify the framing. Instead, the foundation published a boring PDF titled "After 1 year of the Standard: What Changed and What Didn't." It included tables. It included pictures of ledgers on doors. It included a list of things they had to apologize for and how they apologized. It included the line, "We were wrong about X, we did Y. Here's the receipt for Z." It wasn't shareable. It was useful. A grant maker with a reputation for liking proof sent money without a breakfast. The commission, reborn as a working group anybody could audit, ran into the first hard disagreement about how much truth belongs on a donor plaque. The association wanted a QR code that says provenance details available online. Noemi wanted a line that read E&H Ants T Todd Bowes 1998 next to the donor's name. Visitors don't need that much detail. The association chair said, "Visitors need respect." Noemi replied. The compromise ended up honest and kind. A symbol next to the name that told a story at a glance and a line of text anyone could read without a phone. Kids got good at the symbol fast. So did grandparents. The working group started measuring how often people asked questions about labels, and then, quiet miracle, how often docents had better conversations.
The next gala on the calendar belonged to a partner organization run by an old friend of Veronica's, which meant the surprise would arrive like a handshake, not a headline. Celia caught wind of a legacy cameo in the program, an unscheduled donation announcement for a rare piece with impeccable family history. She saw the words family and impeccable in the same sentence, and felt her face do the thing it does before she swears. She moved 3 meetings. She called Noemi. She called the jeweler. She called Johnny. She called the partner's ops lead and asked a question that saved the night. "Do you want to be in a video next week as a cautionary tale, or do you want to be bored with us tonight?" By 6, they were backstage at a different ballroom with the same chandeliers and the same carpets that swallow adjectives whole. The legacy cameo turned out to be a watch with a family crest and a story that involved a ship and a war and a grandfather who practiced heroics. The watch was lovely and not at all old. Under UV, the lume blushed 21st century. The engraving had been cut by a laser that didn't exist when the story claims it did. The donor, who had been lied to by someone who smelled his hunger for family myth, looked like a man witnessing an inheritance evaporate. Noemi put a hand on the edge of the table and said, "I'm sorry," like a professional who knows when grief is the correct response. The donor nodded once, hard, then twice, soft, and put the watch back in his pocket. "Thank you," he said, "for not making me pretend." Veronica escalated from rumor to lawsuit. She filed for injunctive relief to force the foundation to remove her name from all communications implying wrongdoing and to block publication of the Verd Project email. The judge assigned to the case had once been a public defender who could smell theater. She denied the injunction and scheduled a hearing. "Bring your receipts," she wrote, merrily, in language that will never appear in a law textbook, but lived for a day on paralegal group chats. On the morning of the hearing, Noemi ironed the navy dress, while the radio muttered about a sports scandal and a weather front. Raphael tied a tie. He had decided to stop hating. Celia printed the standard on paper that would not crumble under oily fingers. The jeweler brought a loop and didn't need it. Johnny brought a torque wrench and left it in the car because this was not that kind of room. They sat on the right side because habit is a kind of mercy. Veronica arrived with counsel and a coat whose confidence cost more than UV bulbs for a year. She sat without looking at them. The hearing lasted 15 minutes and felt like a seminar in the difference between reputation and record. The judge asked whether the statements in the Foundation's release were true. Yes, Celia said. The judge asked whether Noemi's actions had been disruptive. Blessedly, Raphael said. The judge asked whether the Verd Project email existed. It is Exhibit C, the judge's clerk said. Bored in the way that keeps civilizations alive. Injunction denied. Costs to petitioner. Veronica's counsel requested a stay. Denied. The court adjourned. The coat left first. If you're waiting for a public cinematic fall, you don't get one. Veronica didn't vanish into a helicopter. She didn't weep. She did what power does when it loses a round. She switched doors. She resigned from 2 boards with statements that used the word focus. She took a sabbatical that looked like a consulting business. She reappeared 3 months later on a podcast called Legacy Talks to discuss the risks of over-regulating generosity. She remained a person with a house and a calendar. The difference was that fewer rooms let her choose the adjectives. Inside the Foundation, the culture change tried to quietly die. In committee, the way all culture changes attempt. Ops drafted. Exceptions for exigent circumstances. Legal proposed optional disclosure, where donors request privacy. Development wanted flexibility in messaging. Celia put the standard on the screen and circled 3 lines. If we carve out the heart to save the body, she said, we kill the body. Noemi, who had come to the meeting with a tote full of tape and a sleep debt that would eventually have to be repaid, said nothing at first. Then she said, I can go home? Tell me you want me to. Nobody did. The exceptions died the way bad ideas should. Bartine, in draft on a Tuesday before lunch, without applause. Renata hosted a donor circle, without canapes, no microphones, no storytelling, just paper. She showed how her portfolio had shifted. Fewer naming opportunities, more line items like night shift pay, and lamp replacements, and chandelier hours. She said, this doesn't photograph. Then she wrote 3 numbers on a whiteboard. Legal spend, staff retention, refund rate. The donors made noises that sounded like learning. Someone asked whether honesty depresses giving. She replied, it depresses liars. It stabilizes adults. The room laughed in gratitude. A check cleared quietly that afternoon. Celia and Noemi decided to do something small and radical. A training for board members only. No staff, no cameras. They called it Apology Lab. They put chairs in a circle and a ledger on the door. They gave each board member a card that read, write an apology for a time you used confusion to hide mistake. Bring a verb and a plan. There were groans. There was eye-rolling. Then there were sentences. One board member cried quietly when he realized he had never apologized to anyone with less money than him, without making it about his grace. Another said, I'm sorry, like English might let him keep the roof of his mouth. Noemi told them to try again, until they sounded like they believed themselves. When they got close, she nodded. Now go write it down, she said. The room forgets, paper doesn't. The last twist before the finale snuck in disguised as compliance. A venue manager, eager to show alignment, moved all the ledgers to high eye level for visibility. Noemi walked in and saw a wall of forms out of reach of the people who touched the things. She didn't scold. She asked a server to sign. The server couldn't reach. Noemi pulled the tape off until it snapped like a gum line and retaped each ledger lower. Door by door, hinge by hinge, until hands could land where pens waited. The manager looked horrified, then grateful, then took a photo of the correct height and sent it to his staff with the caption fix this today. He didn't need a meeting. He needed a tape measure. Sometimes that's the whole plot. The invitation to the donor summit arrived with a schedule that smelled like an ambush. Panel #3. safeguarding trust without chilling generosity. Moderator, Veronica Vale. Noemi looked at the email and felt the calm of someone who has folded 1,000 fitted sheets. We go, she said. We don't flinch. Celia raised an eyebrow. You ready to be interrupted? I'll bring a screwdriver, Noemi said, for the table legs. They prepared the way people do when they expect a trick and plan to be boring anyway. They printed the standard. They printed refund totals. They printed a list of apologies and how much each had cost in money and saved in dignity. They printed the city code provision and highlighted the parts that still needed muscle. The jeweler would be in the second row. Johnny would be in the aisle near the power strip. Danny, her nephew with the science board and a newly honed eye for where whiteboards belong, got a lanyard and a job. Taped the ledger low at the entrance. Veronica opened the panel like an archer opens a quiver. We are all here because we care about trust, she said, which was true. But we must ask whether an obsession with procedure destroys the spontaneity that makes generosity beautiful. Heads nodded in that pretty dangerous way. She turned to Noemi. Miss Reyes, you have become the face of what some are calling the cotton test movement. Do you accept that your insistence on receipts has alienated donors? Noemi felt the familiar urge to use a joke as a shield. She didn't. Receipts aren't a mood, she said. They're memory. Generosity without memory is a lie waiting to happen. Veronica's smile didn't move. So your answer is yes? No, Noemi said. My answer is that the donors we lost were buying a performance. The ones who stayed are funding a practice. She held up a page, a list of names, some big, some new, next to line items nobody likes to brag about. These people paid for night shift stipends and bulb replacements and apology workshops. None of them asked to be tagged on social. A man in the second row, one of Veronica's old guard, raised his hand. We're not monsters, he said, defensive before the question had grown up. We just don't want to be shamed for trying to help. You're shamed when you lie, Noemi said. You're thanked when you learn. Veronica moved to the prepared sting. Isn't it true that the chandelier crises you've dined out on could have been handled quietly, without drama? Johnny stood. He didn't like standing up in rooms like this. He did it anyway. I wrote monitor on a line, and nobody funded the hours, he said. Voice ordinary in a way that made it powerful. That screw would have fallen. Maybe not that night, but it would have. Miss Reyes asked the room to listen. It did. That's not drama. That's work. Veronica pivoted to the jeweler. And you, by speaking publicly, have you not violated client trust? My client is the truth, the jeweler said. It pays late and with interest, but it pays. The moderator tried the last arrow. Miss Reyes, a final question. Do you believe you belong in these rooms? Noemi met her eyes and let the silence work for once. If there's a floor, she said, I belong. The room made that human exhale again, the one that means a story landed where it was aimed. Veronica didn't sit down. She had one more folder. Of course she did. She pulled out printed emails with subject lines, calculated for maximum suggestion. Reyes coordination. Detest apply. Press holding statement. She fanned them like a magician who wants you to believe in cards. Leaked correspondences suggest Miss Reyes orchestrates these discoveries to generate attention, she said, voice smooth as stone. How many of your moments were manufactured? Noemi didn't look at Celia. She didn't look at Raphael. She looked at Danny by the door, who had just taped a ledger low enough for an impatient billionaire to sign without bending too far. She looked at Johnny, who could fix gravity with a wrench and a spare hour. She looked at the jeweler, whose hands had held other people's heirlooms the way some people hold babies. Then she looked back at the room and said, none. She took the folder, thumbed through it like laundry. Coordination, she read. That's where we set up a table and a light, because truth needs furniture. Cotton tip supply. We buy them in bulk now because lies blush more often than we hoped. Press holding statement. That's what you write when you don't want to improvise a sorry. She lifted her eyes. You want a conspiracy? Here it is. We decided to be boring on purpose in rooms that worship spectacle. There was a beat, the kind you feel in your throat. Then a hand at the back. Someone you wouldn't cast for this role. A quiet donor who'd been along for the ride without posting about it, went up. I'll fund boring, she said. It helps me sleep. It was then, precisely then, that the fire alarm chirped in a frequency that makes even the jaded look up. Not a full blare, a warning, the kind that tells you a sensor is tired or a toaster is ambitious. Veronica smiled with half her mouth as if to say, "See, your obsession creates chaos." Noemi held up a hand. "Hold," she told the room, and looked to Johnny. He listened, not to the alarm, to the air. He shook his head. "False positive," he said. "Duck draft." He walked to the wall unit, opened the panel with a quarter, and reset a sensor that had lost an argument with the HVAC. The chirp stopped. The room settled. Noemi smiled, a tired smile that had been practicing since she was 19. "Boring," she said, into the mic. "It's the point." The moderator glanced at the clock and declared the panel complete. People stood in the way people do when they've made decisions without formally noticing. A line formed, not for selfies, but for the ledger at the door. Pens scratched. Veronica closed her folder and stepped off stage without waiting for applause. Noemi stayed. She talked to a caterer who wanted to write a ledger that would stop his staff from getting blamed for things the schedule caused. She wrote a note for a museum that needed a policy letter it could hand to donors with pedigrees and expectations. She listened to a woman who had been a donor, then a beneficiary, then a donor again, and who wanted to know whether it was okay to ask for a receipt for the apology she had been owed. "Yes," Noemi said. "Yes." When the room emptied, Raphael reached for the mic and didn't take it. "You good?" he asked. "I'm not bored yet," she said. "Then we're not done," he replied. And for once it didn't sound like work threatening to be forever. It sounded like a promise keeping itself. The day after the summit, the working group's minutes went online, unedited, signed, time-stamped, and nothing caught fire. A few donors grumbled. A few boards rolled their eyes. A few columnists tried to wring drama from a PDF and failed. What did change, immediately and irreversibly, was the way other rooms watched themselves. A zoo taped a ledger to the door of the reptile house. "Who touched this last and why?" And a 7-year-old asked the keeper whether "why" could count as "because I care." The keeper said yes and meant it. A small town library put a ledger on the donation box and logged "emptied by" with the names of people who had gone their whole working lives, never seeing their handwriting on a public wall. The bus depot wrote the week's rain plan, where hands actually land. The NICU nurse sent a voice note in the quiet between alarms. The hum stayed friendly. "Tell your ladder man." The Attorney General's office moved at the speed of care, which is slower than outrage and faster than rot. When their report arrived, it read like decency in a suit: findings, not fireworks. A handful of estate lots were identified as misrepresented, fines issued, a specific appraiser disbarred, a restitution fund seeded for donors who bought fiction at auction prices and chose not to punish the truth for catching it. The short paragraph that became a screensaver in at least 4 offices read, "We do not confuse heritage with impunity. We do not define generosity as the power to skip line items everyone else must obey." It was not a poem. It did not need to be. Veronica Vale didn't go away. She turned. The lawsuit lost on paper became a podcast and then a salon. On Legacy Talks, she sat straight-backed and spoke in measured tones about overreach, about the cold hands of bureaucracy on the warm heart of giving. She coined a phrase, spontaneity tax, that trended for exactly a news cycle. Showrunners called. She declined. Rooms invited. Fewer than before. Enough to survive. That's what systems do when they've been caught lying. They adjust just enough to keep lying comfortable. What they didn't count on was the part where boredom had turned out to be contagious. Celia's inbox filled with subject lines that had never been paired with gratitude before. Light bulbs funded. Epology workshop booked. Chandelier hours added. A Midwestern hospital borrowed the apology template whole and sent a stack of letters after a scheduling failure. The letters had verbs and timelines and vouchers for gas and child care, and the name of a person who would pick up the phone. Complaints dipped. Sleep increased. A clinic waiting room stopped reminding people of airports. No press release, just less fear. Raphael learned to use the word budget like a key instead of a cudgel. He sat in rooms where other men practiced being central and chose the back row on purpose. He watched for the small betrayers, perpetuity, reasonable, industry standard, and underlined them until faces got tired of pretending those words meant something, and replaced them with numbers and deadlines and names. He stopped flinching at sentimental. He started correcting it to specific, and still rooms tried to relapse. A partner museum, good people, good intentions, weak knees, drafted an exception for a VIP loan. Provenance online via private link, label abbreviated for spatial considerations. Noemi printed the draft, took the elevator up, and set the paper on the curator's table, like a plate that had not been washed well enough. Space, she said, eyebrow high, write smaller. We'll lose the loan, the curator whispered. Maybe, Noemi said, you'll keep your wall. The curator chose the wall. The VIP sulked. The docent smiled. Children pressed their UV lights to the edge of an old story and saw that it could still glow without lying. The phone calls got stranger, which is how you know a standard is growing legs. A stadium asked how to write a ledger for a locker room after a rash of missing items always found beneath mats. Put the ledgers low, Noemi said. Make the captain sign too, and pay the person who keeps the pen. A wedding planner asked whether enhanced could apply to timelines. Yes, Noemi said, if you tell the couple where you rounded. A chef asked for the apology template to use with a supplier who had sold local shrimp from 3 states away. You can fix a menu faster than you can fix a reputation, Raphael told him, and wrote a check so the chef didn't have to choose between integrity and payroll that week. At the shelter, a second crisis almost happened and then didn't, which is the most boring kind of miracle. Someone propped open a fire door for air. A night aide taped a ledger next to it with a line that read WHO touched this last, and why, and wrote his name, and because I needed to breathe. The morning manager saw it, bought a fan the size of a bathtub, and wrote his name, and so the night staff can breathe safely. The door shut, the alarm didn't chirp. Nobody wrote a think piece. People slept. The slowest war was fought in meeting minutes. Ops proposed a pilot of exceptions for legacy donors, which would have been the beginning of the end in more glamorous rooms. Celia wrote no in the margin in a tidy hand, and then for the benefit of the reasonable, wrote the numbers. Refunded lots cost X. Litigation avoided cost Y. Staff turnover dropped by Z after the standard. If you want to erase the only part of our process that is working, she wrote, present a budget that enjoys chaos. The proposal died. Tuesday, before lunch. No cameras. The best kind of victory. The last public reckoning with Veronica didn't arrive in a glare of light, but in a line of text. The association, under new chairmanship, a woman who ran a warehouse like an orchestra and had no patience for adjectives, published its own standard. Page 3, line 8. Publish enhancements in lot descriptions. No surprise heritage items. Ledger on doors at hand height. Page 5 included an apology template that looked suspiciously like Noemi's, down to the example sentence. We were wrong about X. We did Y. Here is the receipt for Z. Veronica's name didn't appear in the document. Neither did Noemi's. Standards rarely credit their midwives. Their reward is being taken for granted.
It stung and felt correct at the same time. There remained the question of the Verder Project emails, and what a room should do when a person's face had become synonymous with a practice that needed to stop. The board didn't stage a public flogging. They didn't stage anything. They put the emails on a wall for a month, names redacted, except where law said they must not be, and let staff and donors read. Then they took action that would never make a headline. Changes to procurement, a rule about no single office can approve provenance, a budget line nobody could move to marketing. Veronica resigned from the last committee that still had her name. She sent a note about refocusing. Nobody replied all. They recycled the paper. They kept the standard. That was the point. The banquet that had laughed, really laughed when Raphael arrived with a woman in a navy dress and a gray badge needed one last lesson that humans can understand without a slide. They planned it. They did not rehearse. They invited the same donors, the same servers, the same instrument that had learned to wait for silence instead of filling it. There was no jewel, no crate, no surprise lot. At each table, a folded card explained the boring things money had bought since the last time: lead replacements, extra hours for Johnny, a legal retainer used to write apologies, not avoid them, new filters by the vents, a fan at the shelter, a stipend for docents who answer questions instead of recite labels. It felt like a grocery list for a civilization. People read, a few smiled. The room's shoulders dropped. On stage there were no speeches longer than 2 minutes. Marco Raphael to some, but more Marco than ever went first and last. We learned to be specific, he said at the beginning. We slept, he said at the end. Between those lines, 4 people stood. The NICU nurse with an update that the hum had stayed loyal. Gloria with a new trick for cradling a cart so a step doesn't bruise a shin. The jeweler with an example of a label that said E-Enhanced Heat, 1998, and still made a child gasp in a way that doesn't require lying. Johnny with a torque wrench held low, grinning like a man who does not want to be central, and somehow landed in a spotlight. Anyway, he said, it's just a screw, and the room gave that sentence the respect it had denied it for a year. Noemi was last. She didn't stand at the lectern. She stood by the service door, where she could see the whole room the way she likes to see. Corners, lines of sight, the exact height where a hand would knock. We are not calling ourselves heroes, she said. We are calling ourselves by our names and writing them down where the work is. We still miss things. We will miss things again, but the room knows how to apologize now, and to fix, and to put the ledger where hands are. She lifted the dictionary, open to integrity, and tapped the margin where she'd written maintenance and memory. This is our faith, she said. Not perfection, maintenance, not a monument, a ledger, not legacy, memory. The applause wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. Something better happened. The sound of pens. Afterward, in the kitchen, because kitchens are where you tell the truth without microphones, Noemi washed a bowl her hands had not dirtied, and felt that small electric peace that shows up unannounced on exactly the right days. Raphael dried with the intensity of a man practicing the sacrament of being useful. Abuela, who had begun attending events under the job title catering critic, pronounced the soup honest and the bread new enough to count. Donnie, taller by a conspiracy of inches, took a stack of ledgers, taped them low in the rooms that would get cleaned last, the ones the donors never see, and wrote his name so neatly a janitor laughed out loud, and added a heart. The violinist packed up and stayed to help move chairs. Celia put the standard back in her bag like a backup light. Johnny counted screws and went home before the building could miss him. On the way out, Noemi paused at the lobby desk that had once been a checkpoint and was now most days just a desk. The woman behind it looked up immediately. "How did we do?" she asked. not for a survey, for a conscience. Noemi thought of the first sticker, the laugh, the napkins green, the warm crate, the false alarm, the 97 small choose this not. That's that make up a night that holds 8, she said. Because we left 2 points to earn tomorrow. She walked out under a chandelier that had learned to stop calling attention to itself, into a city that will never finally behave, and is therefore worth loving. Raphael fell into step without angling for romance or credit, only a question that has become their ritual. Sleep, she said. Soup, he offered. Memory, she said. And he smiled because that word had started to taste like a plan instead of nostalgia. At her apartment, the gray badge still clung to the fridge near the dictionary, and a photo of a kitchen table with tape on the edge, where a boy had measured fairness. Noemi touched the badge with the same finger that had once tapped glue from a label, and tightened a screw with a borrowed quarter. Then she wrote a new line on the ledger by the door. Whicho touched this last, and why? Noemi, to make sure tomorrow remembers. She turned off the light. Before you leave, give this story a score from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell us, in one sentence, the smallest ledger you'll tape this week.